I knew that there was a way for us to be able to tell this person's story so that I could not only remember who they are, but connect with them and feel like I had just had a coffee chat with them. What I was observing was that they were putting all of this effort and all of this money, like we all do, into our marketing. But if you land in somebody's inbox and they don't remember who you are, or if they're scrolling and they can't remember why they followed you, they can't remember what you're about, if they don't differentiate you and remember you and connect with you, you are wasting so much time and energy and money. And I knew that with one video that was told in a very curated, intentional way, we could get that person to a whole different part of the audience's brain and their heart, right? If we connected with them emotionally, they would not only remember, but they would like seeing that person show up in their inbox. They would like seeing them show up in their feed. They would be a lot more willing to react and engage and reply and click because of that connection. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Empire Secrets. I'm your host, Mariana Henninger. This is the podcast if you are an established online business owner, if you are a coach or a course creator, you know your niche really well, you have a proven offer, you've launched at least once, you're making 6 to 7 figures. This is the place where I share all sorts of ninja tips. And if you are just getting to know me, I want to tell you a little bit about my origin story. And I'm going to talk today about why I think origin stories suck. So it's a little bit ironic. I promise you this episode will not suck. You're going to walk away with a lot of proven tips. And ideally, what I really want to talk about today is a perspective shift on what the origin story is and why it is not a good story to tell. Why do we use it? Why do we talk about it? And what you should do instead. So first off, what the heck is an origin story? To me, an origin story, the story that you share when people ask you like, why do you do what you do? How did you get started? Right? Oftentimes I go on podcasts, like this is a very typical question to get asked, like, how did you start this business? People want to know. It's great. It's great that people want to know. And to be honest, there is a little bit of space for an origin story if you were asked that specific question. But the problem is that a lot of people then take their origin story and tell it everywhere. Like that's the only story that they tell when they're on their About Me page or when they, are sharing something about themselves. They just go back to this like really typically kind of convoluted or all over the place story where each time they're kind of saying something different, something random. They're just sort of grasping at straws at like what's going to be interesting about the story. What do people actually want to hear? When instead you should be using this opportunity when somebody asks you to tell a very specific story. The reason for this, and those of you following me, you already know that I talk at length about the brand story. And what a brand story is essentially a very curated, very intentional way of telling your story to accelerate trust in a way that builds deep and personal connection right away with somebody. So it has to be concise, it has to be intentional, it has to be very specific about which story or small stories that you share and how you share them so that you can have this effect on people. Do not think that you're going to have this effect on somebody that you're just meeting or on somebody from a cold audience, a lead, somebody who's just coming across your content online. Read a random story, you're going to get random results. You're going to get probably results that are not very effective. And so this is why I think the origin story is no bueno. It's because it's not intentional. It's kind of all over the place. All it is what you think might be interesting about what led you to do what you do. Now, it doesn't mean it's not necessarily a good story. It just doesn't have the power of a well-curated brand story that's very specifically talking about what parts of your story are going to cause people to trust you faster. So with that said, I actually want to share with you what my origin story is. And the reason is because I find it interesting that I don't talk about it very much. I'm so focused on my brand story. I'm so focused on telling the parts of my story that I know will build trust faster because this is my entire framework for my brand video accelerator, my brand video system is using the brand story in this very unique way that I teach and that I have proven works so well. But I don't feel like I always talk about, or I never talk about what led me to here, right? And I find that sometimes I get asked that question in podcasts. I was like, you know what? I think this is actually a really interesting story that my audience doesn't know. So on today's episode, I'm going to give it to you in as quickly as I can. My origin story is this, guys. Most of you know I was a documentary filmmaker for about 15 years. I have an Emmy, I have 2 nominations, and I worked at the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, all in their Manhattan offices. And then the last corporate gig I had was at NBC for about 5 years. And so during that time, my focus was short documentaries. And I was able to travel the world telling people's stories for a specific, usually journalistic reason. So most of the stories that I worked on were stories of people whose lives illustrated something that was interesting that was happening in the world that other people cared about. But I was able to talk about this issue through this person's life. You know, I went to Afghanistan and Haiti and Ukraine and Finland and the Middle East a bunch of times. And south of the border, I went to Guatemala, I went to Mexico, I went to Australia, I was in Brazil. And so in all of these places, kind of the common thread was that I had to meet people and very quickly earn their trust. You know, people who were not necessarily used to telling their story. None of them were used to being on camera. You know, every once in a while, I filmed a celebrity who was very used to getting mic'd and used to being on camera and spoken sound bites and all that good stuff. But for the most part, I dealt with real people with real lives in real situations, sometimes not so great situations, sometimes just one day. So I had to learn to earn their trust very, very quickly. And their trust meant to me that they would open up and tell me their story. And they trusted me that I was going to do their story justice, that I wasn't going to misrepresent them, that I was going to let the world see their story on these big, big platforms that I was working for in a way that was truthful to their story. And, you know, for my purposes, I think people were less, you know, conscious of this other sort of element to the story, which was that I was very intentional about making their story as impactful as possible. I knew I had, for the most part, 2 or 3 minutes, right? Documentaries went from anywhere from like 2, 3 minutes to 10 minutes. I did a 45-minute documentary that ended up in Peacock. But for the most part, my documentaries were kind of short in terms of, you know, feature-length films. So I knew I had to pack a massive punch by knowing which parts of their story were going to move the needle emotionally for whoever was watching and make them feel something, make them feel like they actually cared about this person, that they actually, first of all, would watch it. And then second of all, would come away from that story thinking, wow, I now know more about what this person is going through that I never knew before because I had just been reading headlines or statistics or these big numbers or these big stories, but now I actually felt it. And so I can give you a bunch of examples here, but I'm going to try to keep this short. And so that was a big component of what I did. And the reason I started Brand Magnetic was because I realized as I was coming out of the journalism and documentary world into the entrepreneurial world, knowing that I wanted to build my own business, knowing that I never wanted to ask for a raise again. You know, I spent about a year negotiating my last raise at NBC. And I told myself when I finally got that raise, it was the HR person's last day there. She was about to be replaced. And she was like, Mariana, we've been negotiating for a very long time. This is my final and best. And if you don't say yes to this, you're going to have to start over with this next person. And I knew that it was not a good situation for me to be in. But luckily for me, the number was great. So anyway, took about a year to negotiate quite a big raise. It was about 35% raise of my salary. But I knew that after a whole year of negotiating, I never wanted to do that again. I knew that I never wanted to have to spend so much time and energy proving how good I was and how valuable I was, despite my Emmy, right? But anyway, so with that, I knew I wanted to start my own business. I got into entrepreneurship, but I knew I didn't want to just be a service provider, or I knew I didn't want to just have a video production company in the traditional sense. I knew I wanted to teach something that would impact a whole lot more people. And I knew that having a video production company, I was essentially trading one job for another, where I was beholden to my clients 100%, right? If my clients didn't pay me, if I didn't, you know, if I was sick or if I needed to travel or whatever, I wouldn't get paid. And I just felt like that was just another job. And so I wanted to build something that was way more scalable and had way more impact, and I could help a lot more people. And I didn't know exactly what it was. I knew it would be in storytelling. I knew it would be in video, but I didn't know exactly what that would look like. And so what happened was I would start signing up for lead magnets. I would start getting them in my inbox. People would, obviously you sign up for Lead Magnet, you're going to get a lot of emails. And people would land in my inbox and I'd be like, who the heck is this person? I have no idea. And so this is what got me started with brand videos. I knew that there was a way for us to be able to tell this person's story so that I could not only remember who they are, but connect with them and feel like I had just had a coffee chat with them. And so this random person whose Lead Magnet I downloaded, what I was observing was that they were putting all of this effort and all of this money, like we all do, into our marketing. But if you land in somebody's inbox and they don't remember who you are, or if they're scrolling and they can't remember why they followed you, they can't remember what you're about, if they don't differentiate you and remember you and connect with you, you are wasting so much time and energy and money. And I knew that with one video that was told in a very curated, intentional way, we could get that person to a whole different part of the audience's brain and their heart, right? If we connected with them emotionally, they would not only remember, but they would like seeing that person show up in their inbox. They would like seeing them show up in their feed. They would be a lot more willing to react and engage and reply and click because of that connection. And now this is just me experiencing this as a human, as a buyer, but there's data to back me up. There's so much data to back me up. Like a big stat that gets that's becoming more and more well known is a study done by the Harvard Business School, whereby it was proven that 95% of decisions are made subconsciously. They're not made with the part of your brain that's really thinking in a practical way. Purchasing decisions are made based on emotions, way more than based on practical thinking. We know that we buy emotionally and then justify rationally. So with that, I knew that there was room in the market. There was a need. There was an absolute thirst for this one unique piece that would create this deep personal connection that we are not able to replicate at scale because we don't have time for enough coffee chats to do that. And so that's why the brand video was born. And that's my origin story, which is so long, right? But the interesting part of it is that I was able over time and over working with multiple clients to develop the framework for the brand story that is the basis of the brand video. And the framework for that brand story is essentially in a nutshell. So I'm going to go into this in the next episode, so stay tuned. But in a nutshell, just to kind of give you a little taste of it, it is really understanding what builds trust in your audience. What does trust feel like for them? And why did they buy from you specifically? So understanding those two things, we're able to reverse engineer back into your story so that we can understand which parts of your story are going to create those feelings of trust. And then the last thing I'll leave you with, because this is a shorty, mega shorty episode, and there's more coming next week on what exactly the brand story structure is and how to think about your brand story. But the thing that your brand video needs to create in your audience, the feelings that it needs to generate are three things. One is that your audience should be absolutely certain that you get them on a very deep level. That is first and foremost on a brand video. They should watch it and they should be like, wow, this person gets me so deeply. They really, really get me. The second thing is that they should feel like you care, that you don't see them as a personal ATM machine, that you don't just look at them as like a number on your Stripe screenshot. You truly care about them and you truly care about getting them results. This is huge, especially because trust is at an all-time low. People are getting burned left and right by people who are charging a lot of money and not delivering the quality. And having people know that you truly care about them, that you will go above and beyond, that you will do what it takes to support them. If you see that they're making an effort, right? Or like people might buy something and not actually put in the work. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who really put in the work, that are coming committed to getting the results that you've promised them, that you will do what it takes to help them get there, that you actually care about them crossing that finish line. And the third thing that your brand video needs to communicate is that you're an expert. And unfortunately, a lot of people focus on that third thing where they're just giving value left and right in their content. And they're not focusing on the fact that most importantly, people need to feel heard and understood. and they need to feel like you actually really care about them. So the third part of that is that you're an expert who can actually deliver on those results. You have the experience, your testimonials speak for themselves, your reviews, your expertise, your copy, all of those things kind of fall into that category, right? Your credentials. But to me, it's the third thing that people are actually caring about. And I feel like leading with expertise is going to just make you more and more blend in to the crowd, because there are a lot of experts out there. There are more and more experts in the online space than ever before. So leading with expertise is not going to get you very far, but leading with emotional connection that comes from having people understand that you get them and know deeply that you care about them is way more important. And then, you happen to be an expert who's really good at what you do. So thank you so much for listening to my origin story. I hope it was enlightening. Let me know if you have any questions. Connect with me on Instagram. So DM me at Brand Magnetic. And in preparation for next week's episode, if you haven't downloaded this yet, go do it right now. It's the ultimate cheat sheet for a brand video that converts. And so you can find that at brandmagnetic.com/cheat sheet. And I hope this has gotten you thinking about which story you're telling when people ask you about you on your About Me page, on your little pinned social post that says About Me. Like, what are you sharing there? Are you literally just playing Russian roulette, hoping something sticks, hoping something lands with your people, hoping to be remembered? Or are you being incredibly intentional about what goes there, knowing for a fact that what you're sharing there is what's going to cause people to understand that you get them, that you care deeply, and that you're an expert? Thank you so much for tuning in to Empire Secrets. Again, I'm your host, Mariana Henninger. Connect with me on Instagram, send me a DM, and I will respond. I love hearing from you guys that are listening to my podcast, and I will see you on the next episode of Empire Secrets. Bye for now.